When you've shedded the trees and the junk underbrush, and now you want to plant natives, what should you plant? And what is the process to get yourself there? That's what we're going to talk about today. And I have with me Kathy Fries. She lives here in South Central Missouri in the Ozarks. And we're going to talk about her situation and her site. So with that, we'll get started. And so we know where you live here in the Ozarks. What is the soils in this area that you're going to plant? Is it pretty good soils, or is it pretty dry and rocky, or is it better soils than that? Like, could you, if you wanted to grow a garden there, could you grow a garden there, kind of thing?
I could probably grow a garden there, Elizabeth, but
Okay.
I don't want to.
Okay.
We have planted other areas that were clay and rocky around our 23 acres.
Okay.
However, this particular area, we call it a ravine. We've had a lot of water wash through there for years and years and years. So there's a lot of good soil in there. It doesn't stay wet all the time, but it does stay kind of dry, damp during the middle of the summer.
Okay. So you're saying the soil's not too bad. So two things are going through my head. One is, let's understand your soils, and then two, let's understand the situation you've got. So the soils are not too bad. You've definitely seen drier and rockier, but at the same time, you know, it's not a, you know, that spot that's on the farm that's wet. You're like, you can't drive there after a rain. You can drive anywhere else, but don't drive there. You're not in that sort of situation. Okay.
Right.
So yeah, I'm kind of thinking you're in that mesic, maybe on the dry side of mesic.
Yeah, that sounds pretty average.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to, you say this is kind of a ravine. And so when you say ravine, do you mean like sides like this? Or do you mean like, you know, kind of a swale thing? So describe to me what it looks like. And you brought some pictures too.
Yeah,
here, so.
I did. So we had a lot of stuff in here before. It's more of a gentle slope down into the drainage area. It does cut through some of the deeper areas, but it's not, I would say you could drive a tractor with a bush hog across the whole thing.
Okay, so it's not so steep you can't drive equipment.
Right, exactly. But we do get a lot of water through there from the fields north of us, and of course the fields on either side of us.
Okay.
During the heavy rain season.
Okay.
That wash through there, but they dry up usually within a few days. But yeah, this area here will flood all the way across.
So it's covered with water during the heavy rain. And how long will the water stay there on that area?
Usually 2 or 3 days, depending, you know, if the rain comes 3 or 4 inches and stops, it'll dry up in 3 or 4 days.
Okay, and while the water is there, is it like, you know, if this is your soil here, this table, is the water up here, or is it just saturated?
No, it'll be 1.18 inches deep all the way across.
Okay, so it actually like kind of ponds up on it for about 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
And then subsides, and then it probably stays pretty wet in this particular part of it as you keep going into it.
Right, for a few days, yeah, it will.
So is that on the whole area that it ponds up, or is it just on the lower end?
Primarily on the lower end.
So that sort of area, I tend to think of the soils on, when you get it to ponding, I'm like, in my mind, we're in the like kind of the wet soils, right? Because sure, they dry out when they dry out,
right?
But in the meantime, I'm guessing, and you tell me if I'm missing the mark, this bottom part is like, you can drive on the upper part if you want to right now, but don't drive down there, you'll get stuck.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So part of it is wet, and part of it is kind of a dry mesic or mesic site.
Right.
Okay. That helps me to get my mind wrapped around it. And I guess you could kind of delineate out, and this is something you can spend the summer learning about too, like reading the soils on the site. But what you want to be able to do is to delineate, okay, this is kind of where the wet starts. This is where it
dries out more.
Yeah, the mesic part of it is.
Right.
Yep. Okay, so bottom end is pretty wet, ponds water. Top
is
end.
Actually the bottom end.
Okay, this is
the northern drier end, so it slopes down towards this.
Okay, so this is what holds water.
Right, that's what the area that holds more water.
So this bottom end, get my head wrapped around your site. Okay, and this is the top end, you said?
Yes. and it slopes down from this to that area.
Okay.
So this would be the deeper, wider area here, and wetter.
Okay. Yeah, this is the wetter. Right. No, yeah, this is a wetter.
After the rain, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of the middle here.
Okay.
And it's been kind of interesting since the forestry mulcher came through and the heavy rains came afterwards. We were able to actually identify where the heaviest water flow went because all the mulch washed to that area. And what it was washing off of as well,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So we still have a lot of mulch, for example, up here in this area. We don't have a lot of mulch left in the drainage area here or in here. It's all piled up and kind of dammed up. So that's been kind of an interesting observation to go through and see where all the mulch washed.
Yeah, yeah, and you can learn a lot here while you're working with it so intensely about the site and how, where does the water go and all that.
Another observation that we have found is, so a lot of this area was covered with a lot of non-native type plants, Japanese honeysuckle and winter creeper and multiflora rose. Okay. We've been able to handle the multiflora rose just by spot treatments. The nature of the multiflora rose is a clump plant, so it's easy to treat. But we've been able to go through and identify the non-natives and the natives. And we have found, surprisingly, very happily, that we have a field of elderberry coming up in here in the northern top end, along with Japanese honeysuckle. And we also have a lot of gooseberries coming up in this area, and buckbrush, and a wide variety of wildflowers as well, snakeroot, violets, and some blackberries. But primarily gooseberries and elderberries are coming up through here. So we're very happy about that, but we're not happy about all the non-natives that are coming up also.
Yeah, okay, so let me make sure I have the situation square in my head. It was trees and underbrush. You came in and you forestry mulched it, used one of those heads that rotates around and spits chips out the back end, basically. Exactly. And then you left some of the trees, obviously, and you took out the underbrush and the trees you didn't want and that sort of thing. And so now you've got trees on part of it, or scattered across it would be a better description. And then you've got some problem plants, Japanese honeysuckle, multiflora rose, winter creeper. And you've got some plants that are coming back naturally that you do want to keep, which would include the elderberry, the gooseberry, the buckbrush you'd like to keep some of, the snakeroot, and the violets. Right. Okay. So, good. Get my head wrapped around the situation. Let's see. So we've got a couple questions to answer. One is, what do we want to plant? And then, how do we get that planted? Like, what is the steps between now and then? Correct. So, okay, let me ask you another question. The trees that are left scattered about, it looks from your photos like sometimes they're in patches and sometimes they're just scattered across there. Let's start with this. The stuff that's really shaded is gonna be harder to deal with and more risky. So you're in that situation where you have to decide, do you want to try to deal with those and plant those? We can talk about those separate, but let's just focus on the part shaded areas / fairly full sun areas. In those areas, do you want to, what percent canopy of shade do you think there is? And I know it's going to be really variable.
That's a great question. So I'm glad you brought this up. Because after the forestry mulcher went through and spring started, and we started seeing everything leafing out, we said, oh, we probably should have removed a lot more trees.
Yeah, it's hard in the winter to estimate what the percent canopy coverage is going to be. Yep.
So one of the approaches that I'm taking right now is, first, let's eradicate all of the extra cedar trees that we couldn't take down with the mulcher. Okay. So we're doing some hack and squirts on those. Okay. To eliminate those. That will help open it up some. The other thing is, this ravine runs from north to south. Okay. It's 600 feet long by about 75 feet wide. And because it runs north to south, it gets a lot of the morning sun in the east coming through. So for example, This is the west side of it in the morning.
Okay.
So from the east side is getting the sun in on that side.
This, where the trees are, is the west side of
Yeah,
you're saying? Yeah,
correct.
okay.
This is the whole ravine here.
Okay.
So it will get anywhere 4 to 5 hours of sun from the east in the morning coming under, and 4 to 5 hours in the afternoon, probably after 2, from the west side coming in. That information, along with the fact that we're going to thin out more cedar trees because it's still pretty heavily shaded. So I'm going to call this probably 60 to 75% shade for right now.
Okay.
But we're hoping to get down to 50%.
50% is the goal. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is just a side note, but actually on cedar trees, you can just, as long as you chop them off below all the greenery, you don't even have to treat them.
I've learned that, but the problem with some of these bigger ones is I have to find a place to put them then, if I chop them off.
Yeah. Oh, so you're leaving it standing and
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Woodpeckers.
That makes sense.
Woodpecker food.
Yep. Bat habitat.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so we've got trees. So you're fairly narrow in all reality. So that's why you're getting the sun in from the morning because it's clear over there, and you're getting sun in from the evening because you've got this narrow strip you're dealing with here.
Exactly.
That's this waterway kind of thing.
Yes.
Okay. So what are the goals as far as like, do you hope to graze cattle there? Is it a wildlife focused goal? Is it like, I want it to look pretty, an aesthetic goal? What would you say your goals are?
Wildlife cover.
Wildlife. Okay.
Yeah.
And when you say wildlife, some people mean, I love deer. I'm passionate about deer. And some people are like, I love quail. And so what does that mean to you?
We have enough deer. And we have grass fields everywhere for the deer, so they're happy. But quail.
Quail. Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of quail around our property, and we want to provide more cover and native plants in there.
Okay.
Food. Turkey. If turkey are welcome, but we have found that if you host for quail, you host for just about everybody else as well.
Yeah. So really, quail is one, and then just a general wildlife focus as well. Not so much on the deer, because you just have a lot of habitat for them anyway. Yeah. But okay, that's good. So as far as aesthetics, do you have a concern there? Like, sometimes people don't want things too tall. So
no,
you're like 12 feet tall.
Don't care.
That's just fine. Okay.
Yeah, we don't care as long as the birds and the quail and the wildlife is happy, and I'm not having to deal with non-native growth. I'm happy.
Okay. What's your thoughts about fire-controlled burns in the future? Do you feel like
We do those.
Okay.
Yeah. We would obviously like it manageable for fire.
Okay. That can be part of, like, the reason I'm thinking about that in brief is just it can be part of the weed management kind of in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you have one of those forestry mulchers in, sometimes there's a lot of thatch, a lot of dead plant, wood chips, that sort of thing, covering the ground. Sometimes it gets incorporated into the soil more. Do you feel like you've got this layer of mulch there, or do you feel like, no, they've gotten incorporated together? Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. I would say a big portion of the mulch that had piled up like that initially has washed into little dams to help with the water flow a lot.
Yep.
Now, and what hasn't washed away has pretty well decomposed or been pressed into the ground by now.
So pretty much anywhere that you went to scatter a seed, you would be able to get it would fall on the soil.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Good.
But I would ask, because of these dams that have formed with the mulch that has washed up now, do I need to worry about getting seed in there, or just because it's a water flow, just let it naturally?
Those are fun decisions you get to make along the way.
Okay.
So if you, obviously they can kind of help prevent some soil movement, right?
Yeah.
So to some degree it's nice to leave them.
Right.
And if they're just little bitty areas, you may decide, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. But at the same time, you will end up with no plants growing in those areas, because even it's hard to avoid them if they're small when you're scattering seeds. But even if you scatter seeds on there, they're not going to come up through it.
Right.
And so you're kind of in this, like, do I want to go ahead and try to get the stand there? You know, maybe you rake it out last thing before you plant.
Okay.
And anyway, we'll make sure I get back to that when we get to we need to figure out what you're planting so that we know how and when to plant.
Okay.
And then that'll inform some of that conversation better. So.
Okay, good.
So, okay, when I think of a planting for wildlife, birds especially, but I'm thinking of a diverse planting. So I'm thinking some native grasses, but then I'm thinking a good component of the native wildflowers. Forbs and legumes would be another way to say that. So what the grasses give me the structure base, and this is a very simplified explanation, but because my mind's simple, but not because you're simple.
No, I appreciate it simple.
But the grasses give us the structure for the wildlife, the home, that sort of thing. And then the forbs, wildflowers, tend to give us the food source, whether that's in the form of the seeds that they produce, or they also tend to be a big draw for the insects.
Yes.
That then, like, insects are a huge part of the summer diet of birds. And so you've got both the winter and the summer with those forbs. And of course, that's all a little bit simplified. But that being said, if I say, hey, what about a mix of wildflowers and grasses? Are you like, yeah, that's what I've got in mind? Or are you like, no, I didn't have that in mind?
No, I think that would be a great approach, because we also love to support the pollinators, obviously, because our birds eat the insects. Especially, yeah. I have a lot of nesting birds.
Okay.
That feed their nestlings insects. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so wildflower and grass mix.
Yes.
And no real height concerns. So, okay, big picture. So there's various mixes that you could use, and I mean, we can even do custom mixes, and you're going to be a little ways off of planting here probably, and we'll get into that more, but we can drill down on the exact mix. But to give you an idea, something like a companion grass mix, mixed with so that's obviously a grass component, mixed with something like, in different areas, we probably need to vary it, because we have a saying, get the right plant in the right place. In other words, if you've got the wet soil, you don't put the same thing there as you put on the dry side, right?
Okay.
And so I'm sitting here balancing, and I'd want to look at the contents of the mix, but something like on the wet end, that wet meadow mix, it has things that don't mind wet feet for 3 days, and then, well, being underwater for 3 days, and then having wet feet for, maybe weeks at a time. And then on some of the drier parts, or where it's less ponded, you might do something like either the shadows and sunbeams, which likes a part shade situation, mm-hmm. or like a prairie patchwork. And so, but we're aiming for that mesic soil situation there. So we've got part of it wet, part of it mesic. So that's something we can get into as we get further down the road. But the big question for today is, how do you go about getting ready to plant a diversity of plants? So I guess to start with the thought of, okay, when you're planting diversity, winter is the time to plant. The seeds have a dormancy in the seed that kind of, basically it is Mother Nature's way of making sure that the seed doesn't germinate in the fall, when it would fall on the ground. It needs to go through winter, because after the cold, moist period comes spring, and that's when we want to germinate. And so planting in the winter is ideal for the kind of mix you're looking at. So if we want to plant in the winter, so right now we're sitting here, it's almost June, and you could plant now, but it's pretty risky, and we've got some weed things you want to work on. So I think if we start with the goal of plant this winter, so November 15th to February 15th for where you're located, then we have the goal in the meantime of kill the invasive plants that we don't want, and hold the soil down. Don't let it all wash away down the creek, right?
Exactly, yes.
Any other goals you can think of in the meantime?
No, just eradicating the non-natives and keeping the soil from eroding are my big top two.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go kill the non-natives first here, and then we'll talk about like what to do to keep the soil from eroding.
Okay.
So let me get a better picture. So you've got the Japanese honeysuckle, the multiflora rose, and the winter creeper that are things that you want to take out of there. Let me ask the question too, the elderberry, the gooseberry, the buckbrush, sometimes those can form very thick colonies, and sometimes they're just scattered plants. Are they thick colonies or scattered plants?
The elderberries are thick colonies.
Okay.
Especially up in the northern area up here. Gooseberries are more through the middle sections. Not really thick, but scattered plants. The violets, snake root, and other stuff, that's all scattered around.
Okay. And the buckbrush, is there much of it?
Oh, you know, I can get rid of buckbrush if I need to because I've got buckbrush everywhere. So
okay.
It wouldn't hurt to get rid of it.
Is it pretty thick or is it scattered?
I would say the buckbrush is probably scattered, yeah.
Okay. And the honeysuckle, the multiflora rose, and the winter creeper, are they scattered or are they in patches? Some of these things probably are patchy.
The honeysuckle is just everywhere. There are big patches of it up north.
Okay.
Up here and with the elderberry. That's one of my big challenges is how to get rid of that honeysuckle without killing all the elderberry because, well, we like elderberry. The winter creeper is in big patches, beds, I would call them. That's probably easier to manage than the honeysuckle only because it's a big bed of it and I can just treat that big bed without walking through treating individual plants.
So I'm starting to divide this in my head into different areas based on like what you've got growing in these different areas.
Okay.
And so because you're going to want to do different things to kill different things, and it doesn't sound like it's just scattered evenly all across the landscape. So if I call it the top end, is that where you've got the elderberries and the Japanese honeysuckle?
Yes, here.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So top end, Japanese honeysuckle, and elderberry. Mm-hmm. You want to kill one and keep the other. Okay. And then what other areas would you define it as far as?
The south end is where I'm having the winter creeper show up under in the mats up there.
And so top end would also be north, is that true? When you say top end
would be north, yes. Okay. And the bottom end would be south.
What is it that was where you've got more of the
winter creeper?
Winter creeper.
Yes.
Okay. Any good stuff in there that you're wanting to keep, like where the winter creeper is specifically?
Not really.
Okay.
No.
And then are there areas where like there's really neither Japanese honeysuckle nor winter creeper? Is that a true statement where it's just kind of like bare soil / good things that you want to keep?
I would say part of the middle here, there may be that area like that. Not a lot of Japanese honeysuckle or winter creeper in here.
Okay.
This is where a lot of the snake root and buckbrush is coming up in here.
So the middle area is really snake root, buckbrush, good stuff that you're fine to see the buckbrush go.
Yeah,
you're signed
and
to not.
Gooseberries, yeah, in the middle.
So let's talk the middle first because that's maybe the easiest. So are these? There's a joke when you're establishing native plants. Says nothing to do with going up to heaven, but that there's 3 secrets to success with a native planting. And the first secret is competition control. The second secret is competition control. And the third secret is competition control. And so, terrible joke, I know, but it helps you to really understand the importance of killing the existing vegetation, right? When we talk about annual plants, like it's hard with a diverse planting to do much about those. So the ragweeds, the crabgrasses, the foxtails, you get what you get. But the perennial plants, like they concern me a lot because they've got a root system that, it may not to the end native plant be very big. Like for instance, a big blue stem, they say a root system on that, if you stretched all the roots end to end, could be 25 miles long.
Wow.
Now, on one plant, right? Fescue doesn't hold a lamp to that, right?
No.
Or buckbrush or any of this stuff.
Right.
But at the same time, it's bigger than the little 1/16 of an inch seedling that our big blue stem would start out with, right?
Right.
So what we want to do is cut down on that competition, because that is going to help us to get a stand when we plant. We want these other plants are going to take all the water, the sunlight, the moisture, the nutrients. And so you're trying to eliminate that competition factor. That being said, the snake root, is this a little purple blooming one? Or is it a white blooming
No,
one?
snake root, white snake root.
Okay.
It's the white blooming one.
And up in the fall time frame is when
Yes.
it blooms. Snake root, there seems to be about 52 different kinds of snake root.
Cattlemen hate it,
Right.
because it makes their cow sick. But
Yeah.
I love it because it's a big pollination bloom around. But while we're talking about competition, we also have to consider erosion in this area.
Okay. Is this a particularly erodible area, or just because there's not plant cover there?
Well, if we eliminate the competition, there will not be anything to hold the banks during the heavy rains.
Okay. So if project up into this, you did your mulching here this winter, right?
Yes.
Project yourself, and it may already be greening up enough, you've got a good idea, but
It is.
project yourself up in, August. Is this the middle? Let's go for the middle section where you don't really have your honeysuckle or your winter creeper.
Right.
Is this pretty much like haired over green? Like, you walk out there and you're looking down at your toes and you can't see them in most areas? Or is it like,
it's sparse?
so one plant here in the area of this table, which is, I don't know what, 4 foot by 3.
Right. There may be a few gooseberries and a violet here or there, and 1 or 2 snake roots.
So there's a lot of bare soil showing.
Yes.
Okay. That's good, because if your buckbrush, your gooseberries, your even violets, if they're too thick, what we're going to want to do is stress them so that they're like, oh boy, life's really getting rough. I better draw my footprint in, if that makes sense. So they're not as much competition.
Right.
And then they can kind of start off on kind of an equal footing with the seeds you're seeding. But if you're like, oh yeah, something the size of this table, there's 50% bare soil or more.
I would estimate that's about right. Yeah.
Okay. If you get up into the summer and you're like, oh, that's hairing over worse than I thought it was going to, I'm getting more canopy coverage, I would use some either, you got some choices here. You can either use repeated mowings, or because that stresses a plant, right?
Okay.
You whack off its greenery and it's like, oh, I better pull from my root reserves, reestablish a top growth.
Okay.
And then you come in and you whack it off again. It's like, hey, I didn't really get recovered. You're really stressing me out here. And then maybe you can fit that in 2 or 3 times during the growing season.
Okay.
And that makes it like more stressed.
Okay.
And so we're not looking to necessarily kill them, but these seeds are probably also in the seed bank, like especially the snake root.
Yes.
I would think those seeds are going to be in the seed bank. They'll probably, no guarantees in life, but I think they'll probably come back for you. Okay, so mowing is one option. Of course, herbicides are another option, and I don't know how you feel about herbicides. Some people are like, not with a 10-foot pole. Some people are like, hey, they're a useful tool. I'll use them to a limited extent when I need. Where do you fall on that?
I am totally with the using herbicides.
Okay.
According to whatever safety labels, of course.
Yeah, sure.
We are very conservative with the herbicides, primarily because I also host a lot of birds and quail and the turkey and everything as well. But so we don't want to harm anything.
Sure.
But at the same time, without the use of herbicides, we would be overwhelmed with this Japanese honeysuckle and multiflora rose and autumn olive and everything else we're fighting at the time. So yeah, we will use herbicides where needed.
Okay.
We're just very conservative with it.
Okay, fair enough. So you could also use some herbicides to, knock things back. Okay. You'd need to, since you're probably not thinking you need to necessarily control things there, we could talk about herbicides, but probably not the focus in that area. Probably mowing is a better tool unless you just are like, wow, there's way too much, in which case kill it back and let it start over from the seed bank with everything else.
Okay, good.
So that's the middle area. Let's go to the north end, which north or top, which was the Japanese honeysuckle and the elderberry. You want to keep the elderberry, kill the Japanese honeysuckle. Okay, so let me, just before we say we want to blanket keep the elderberry, again, too thick, we're going to not be able to establish things in underneath them. So like, you know, you can, there's this like balance, right? A lot of times I like everything to start off as a seedling on the same day. Will they come back from the seed bank? Probably, but no guarantees, right? So some of this is, no, I just want to partition off a spot like such, and I don't care if the native seedlings come in underneath that. I just want elderberries there. That's fair enough. Or no, my priority is really the natives, and so I'm going to kill the elderberries so that they all start off on the same foot, and hopefully the elderberries will come back. Which side of that do you fall on, if that makes sense?
We're willing to sacrifice some elderberries,
okay,
to get other good natives established there. It just looked like a great area that elderberries like that, and why fight Mother Nature
right.
with the natives?
Well, and this is just totally off, not exactly off topic, but I did one time do some cuttings of elderberries, and so like before leaf out, or I've forgotten some of the finer details of it, but they do cuttings, root cuttings. They will like form roots on the stick, you know, that you stick in some water. Wow. Yeah. Pretty easy. So if you've got elderberries in other areas, if you manage to kill all these out and none of them are coming back, you might be able to employ something like that to reestablish them. Yeah. Or leave yourself a little 5-foot colony out here that they can reestablish from. Yeah. You can do cuttings from, all of that stuff.
Because it is more important to me to get rid of the non-natives, such as the Japanese honeysuckle, than it is to keep the elderberry. Okay. That would be, I guess if I had to sacrifice elderberries, that would be my priority, is to get rid of the Japanese honeysuckle.
Okay. So now we have the question of how to get rid of the Japanese honeysuckle.
Right.
This is, it's not one that I've got a ton of an experience with, and I actually got a hold of some of our production guys to see if they actually had some experience, because sometimes they've got experience different than what I've got, and they didn't either. So I did a little research on this one ahead of time. I looked up glyphosate, or Roundup is what we commonly call it, but glyphosate's the active ingredient, is one option, and it was on that label. The Pasture Guard, it was not on that label. Does that? I know I went and forgot my details, didn't I?
I think honeysuckle was on the Pasture Guard, but winter creeper was not.
Okay. Yeah, so it was on both the glyphosate and the, okay. So herbicide labels, as you well know, are a wonderful tool. You've watched me pilfer through them here ahead of time, right? And so those are both options. Now, here's an idea for you on the Roundup or glyphosate. I have heard presentations, do not have direct experience with this, where they took and they, like this, and this was on bush honeysuckle, but it stays green later. This stays green after leaf drop on your trees. Is that a true statement?
That is true.
So they're staying green later, so you've got a wider window. Glyphosate works on green growing things. And so, but once they're brown, like a tree that's dormant, it's not going to affect it. And so they actually were coming in after leaf drop on the canopy of trees up here, and they were actually aerially spraying it with a water-friendly formulation. I think it's called rodeo of glyphosate, but I'm not sure you need to involve aerial applications of this. But at the same time, of course, the trees had dropped their leaves, so they weren't affecting it, but other things had went dormant. So your elderberry might be dormant in that time frame.
Oh, sure. Okay.
But if we wait until that late, and so we're talking like what, 1st of November, 15th of November, something like that. Yeah. The trees have dropped their leaves there in late October, first part of November. And you wouldn't have to wait for leaf drop necessarily, but a lot of other things are dormant that you don't want to hurt. So that's an advantage. It could allow you to save the elderberries, but you need to make sure you're not really saving very many elderberries, or it's in an isolated area. The other problem is you've got one little chance, and if it doesn't work right for you, it comes back from seed. You have spray misses. The glyphosate takes a long time to show the results there when it's cool. And so you may not know what your success is until after you've done your planting, and then you're like, now I've got Japanese honeysuckle still alive, and I'm trying to establish natives, and I've got no herbicide options whatsoever. Right. So that's a little risky. You could do some pasture guard, probably take out your elderberries too. Don't know that for sure. But that might be a little safer, is to use that here during the summer.
Okay.
And then you do still have that glyphosate option later. You could probably use and again, the label is your friend. Since we don't have direct experience with this, like, I don't have it all stuck in my head, but just anyway, get a timing that's effective according to the label. Some brush likes to be sprayed, once when like new leaves, or some of it is better with established leaves because they get waxy. And so follow your label. Label's your friend.
Okay.
And it'll help you to know if you need any additives in the herbicide too, to make it stick better and more effective, right?
Okay.
So those are two options, and I think I'd give myself plenty of chance. Right now, the honeysuckle, when you mulched it, did it get kind of started? You kind of mulched it up, spit it out as wood chips, and now it's greening back up.
Correct. That
may be a really good, a lot of times brush that's like vigorous new growth is more susceptible to herbicides.
Oh, okay.
And again, different species of brush, different things, but also makes it easier to get contact with the plant, right? If you've got this mound of honeysuckle here,
right,
it's hard to get contact with all the leaves of it.
So the decision is I need to make a decision whether to go ahead and hit all the honeysuckle now with something that will, I will be able to see results.
Yep.
With the chance of eradicating elderberry.
And we could look and see, like, if you're...
or wait until the fall after the first frost and then hope that I can eradicate it.
Yes. Yeah, that's a little more risky. Might leave more elderberries than you really want to leave too. Let's just see if elderberry happens to be on this label. Does not specifically mention it in the broadcast directions for woody plants here. So don't know, and I am not reading the entire label here.
Okay.
But don't know, but it a lot of broadleafs, elderberry would be one of those, are affected by pasture guard, but not everything. It's kind of a little hit and miss, is my experience with it.
I could take a mixed approach and hit the worst part of the Japanese honeysuckle now.
Yep.
Risking getting rid of some elderberry, and then hit the sparse stuff later.
Yeah.
This year. Maybe take a
mixed
combined approach. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got lots of options there.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's bad because then you have to decide what to do.
Right, because you mentioned the fact that once I plant the native seed, it's really difficult to make the decision to go back in and spray again.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you go to diversity, you're committed, because there's no herbicide option that you can use to take out something you don't want out of the rest of the stuff you do want, because you've got too much diversity out there for any herbicides to work.
Okay.
Which is part of what makes me feel good, like from the herbicide standpoint, when we are using herbicides, I'm like, well, we're using them for this limited time before we get established. And then unless we're just spot spraying, of course that's an option in the future, but we're not broadcasting the whole field with herbicides year in, year out, every couple months or something. And so anyway, in my mind, that gives me a little more peace. Like, this is a tool I'm going to use at this one period of time, and then I'm going to go away from it. But that is another little rabbit trail I followed there. So.
Okay. All right. Good.
Okay. So you feel good on the north or top end.
Yes.
Then we're down to the bottom or south end, which has that winter creeper in it. Again, not good experience on my part. Pasture guard, and it was not on the pasture guard label. It was not on the glyphosate label. Good luck, but some resources. A lot of times it's finding somebody that has experience with it. So some resources you might reach out to would be like the Missouri Prairie Foundation.
Okay.
Maybe they have ran into that on one of their prairie restorations they've done.
Okay.
Missouri Department of Conservation. Since you're here in Missouri, maybe they've got experience with it. They know how to get rid of it. Herbicide reps, like if you can find a knowledgeable, like you could call, like Dow AgriScience is the one that makes the pasture guard here. You could call them and say, hey, can I talk to somebody to, know more about this? And a lot of times they may have more experience that they can also share.
Okay.
So those are some ideas. I just don't have experience with it. And you got Dr. Google. You can, you can also see what Dr. Google tells you to do.
Fair enough. Yes, absolutely. Okay.
But, yeah. So just big picture, herbicides, of course, are a tool. Mowing is a tool. I don't think that's going to be super helpful, but I guess if I had nothing better to do, I'd probably mow it, once a week or something. Like, defoliation to the point of stressing it to death.
Okay.
And that's some people that don't want to use herbicides. That's the tools you have is, okay, how do I stress these plants? Tillage is another one. Controlled burns are, if you've got fuel, you probably, unless you've got a wood chips, don't have any in this case. You might have after you winter, the leaf drop, you might add some to it, but you need to that could be a part of the picture, but it can only be a part of it. Okay. So in that particular, in any of these areas, but in that area particularly, where if you can't find an herbicide option that'll work, make sure you get it to a good level of control. Well, there's some magic balance here you get to decide, but do I want to go ahead and get it to a good level of control and feel good about it, even if I have to put a whole nother year into the prep? Mm-hmm. Or do I want to risk having to kill out what I planted, right?
Right.
And so you have to balance things like budget and I really want instant success and, all of these things that you're balancing, and you have to decide which way you want to go. But that's something just throw out there for you to keep
I will do some more investigation into the winter creeper. Because apparently birds are spreading the seeds elsewhere as well, so I need to be able to control it in other areas. So
yeah.
I need a good approach for that. I will look into that further.
Sounds good. If you find magic answers and find something that works, let me know, and then I can pass it on to other people.
Excellent.
Okay, so now holding the soil. We've talked about how to get rid of the weeds in each of these areas. Holding the soil. So cover crops is definitely something you can do. And cover crops would just be, like I think of millet or buckwheat or something like that.
Okay.
But I'm just thinking something that's an annual plant, comes up, lives only 1 year, does its thing, dies. I don't really want it to make a bunch of seed because it's going to throw those seeds on the ground, and then next spring there's going to be, and they're dog hair thick.
Yeah.
And, because it made really good seed or whatever. So mowing it off sometime in the summer can be good, or your herbicide application may take care of it.
So mowing it before it goes to seed.
Mowing it before it goes to seed, unless you're doing an herbicide application that's going to get it. But yeah, the mowing is, so cover crops are something you can use. Millet would be good planted now. So we're here, soil moisture is good here right now. You could plant any sort of summer cover crops, just avoid the legumes. So we don't want to add clovers and that sort of thing to the system because a lot of times they have hard seeds that last a longer time.
Oh, okay.
I'm not against legumes as a whole, but I don't want them coming back. That's my big criteria here.
Okay.
So millet, we use millet often. It's one of our favorites, but lots of choices out there in the world. I am a fan of diversity, so you could also do a diverse cover crop with like millets and buckwheats and other summer annual cover crops. So yeah, just make sure they don't make seed. You're going to have to think about and just kind of draw these plans out on some paper. Maybe we should be doing that, but anyway, it didn't start. So think about, do I want, what's the timeline? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and spray with the pasture guard here. Well, I've got a month. I think I'm going to go ahead and throw some millet out there so I can get some growth. Or the pasture guard is actually probably won't, and we'd have to check the label, but pasture guard really works on the forbs, broadleaf plants, not the grasses. So you might be safe. It might not actually hurt your millet, but you probably won't get the millet started where you've got a really thick stand of stuff you're wanting to kill anyway.
No.
Where the honeysuckle is, it's
Right.
probably haired over and good and green, and
Right.
the millet's not going to make it. So, yeah, cover crops can be your friend to
Okay.
hold the soil.
Good. You talked about using millet. Will millet work or come up as well up here in the north end as well as it will, which is drier, as well as it would in the southern end where it's a bit moister?
So I think you can, do fine. It all depends, right? You need to pray for rain properly, and so if it rains a lot, you can overcome a multitude of poor soil conditions, right? I don't have much soil; it's really dry. If it rains a lot, that takes care of that.
Right.
So there's a lot of factors that go into that, but you can grow some millet on some pretty dry stuff.
Okay.
You could also end up with problems in the wetter area if you plant it and it wants to pond over for 3 or 4 days when they're really young seedlings or something. It may not appreciate that.
Okay.
And so risk of that is getting less and less all the time because we're getting into summer here. But I would probably, if you know you want to put some cover crop out, you can plant them kind of through the entire summer.
Oh,
but planting
okay.
conditions are not nearly as good
Right.
through the rest of the summer, right? And you can also plant a winter cover crop. So now we're talking about like oats. And oats is one of my favorite actually for the winter cover crop because it naturally kills out usually in the winter. And so it's a spring oat. It's made to be planted in the spring. But if we plant it in the fall, say September, that kind of time frame, it will grow, do its thing, but then it's not really when it was designed to be planted, so it dies during the winter. It winter kills. So then you don't have to kill it with herbicides, because what you don't want, if you plant like winter wheat, then it overwinters. Next spring it makes all this seed. It's this big thick stand of winter wheat. A little bit can be okay. But too much, and you've just got competition again, back to those 3 secrets to success, right?
Right, right.
So we want to limit that competition. So oats, if you want to plant some of those in that fall time frame, can make a really nice addition to your cover crop. So
that would be a great idea because that would also help with some erosion control concerns.
Yeah.
While we're killing things.
Yeah, and you'll also have the winter's or the fall's leaves at some point, right? And so that'll help with winter as well, at least in areas, and they may not spread evenly.
Sure.
And at some point, you're going to have to get rid of the leaves, which kind of brings us up to, okay, we've done our cover crops. Now we're ready to seed somewhere between November 15th and February 15th. Okay. You've got a big window there, but you need to think about any other actions you need to do before then. So when we seed, what we want is seed to soil contact. We want if this is our soil here, and the table specifically is our soil, we want our seed to fall on that. If it falls on the leaf here, we do not have seed to soil contact. We have seed to leaf contact, and that is not the same. And so this seed's toast when it's here. Okay. So in a savanna sort of situation where you end up with all these leaves, they may all blow off. Sometimes it's like the conditions are such that it's in a small area. They'll just kind of blow off the area. Well, that's fine and wonderful. If they don't, you're going to need to get them off one way or another. We don't want much coverage by these leaves. So you could do a controlled burn. That would give you, obviously open up seed to soil contact. You could, tillage is kind of an option, but I don't think that's where you've got the plants you want to save, and I'm not sure that's where you want to go. I'm missing a very important one. What is it? Oh, so you could also, sometimes we will cut down a cedar tree or a blackjack oak, and sometimes you can kind of drag that around behind a pickup or a tractor or something. Okay. And the leaves will kind of fluff up, and if they've started to get wet and mat down, if you can get them to fluff up, sometimes they'll go ahead and blow off the field for you. And so it just all depends on the wind dynamics, and you may get leaves blowing in from other areas, which does not solve it, right? Right. But one way or another, your goal is to get seed to soil contact. Okay. So just know that before you plant, you have to do that. Then when you get to planting, you know, in a smallish area, you can just do it by hand. That's a lot of times way easier than, you can drill it, you can broadcast it with a machine too. But some of these seeds are like feathers, and you've probably seen them before because you've done other projects. But feathers don't go through a lot of equipment very well that aren't built for it, right? If the equipment is built to seed BBs, feathers don't go through it. And so when you get to seeding, what I like to do, and there's some good videos on our website, or sometimes it's just hard to remember for the next 9 months, you know, all the details you need. But basically, I just mix it with some carrier that gives me more stuff to spread. I stick a bucket under one. I visually divide my seed and my area into fours so that I can kind of get myself calibrated before I run out when I get to the far end.
Right.
And we're happy to sell you more seed, but you may not want to make the trip down here. And so I divide it into fours. I stick seed in a bucket under one arm, and I just go to flinging with the other. Some people are like, can I get one of those little hand spreader things? A lot of times they don't deal with the feathers very well. I mean, you can try it. But hand seeding is definitely practical. Want good seed to soil contact. If you have the option then, after you get done, to drag it with a cedar tree or a blackjack oak, just cut one. You've got plenty of cedars here on the site. So you can cut one of those down and just drag it around behind a pickup or a tractor or something like that.
Okay.
It just kind of helps to embed the seed in the soil. We're not if you bury it no more than 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch. That's max. Okay. And so you want it really shallow.
We're hoping for a good snow.
Yeah, and the snow, some people are like, it's kind of funny. Some people are like, oh, I need to seed like before it snows. And some people are like, I want to seed on the snow. And neither one is bad. I actually like to seed on the snow. Now, I want it a day when the snow is kind of melty, so that the seeds will go ahead and not like blow around, but they will sink in because the sun is shining on them. And so, but I can see where I've been really easy when there's snow.
Right.
But you can also do it before snow, and then the snow comes down and just kind of nestles them into the ground as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good tools. Any questions on your part about how to do the seeding, when to do the seeding?
No, sand, a good medium to mix seeds with? Or?
So it's fine. However, it can have weed seeds in it.
Oh.
And so that's not what you did not want to add Johnson grass to the mix of invasives in the planting.
Right.
So a lot of times I prefer something that I feel like is pretty weed free. Kitty litter, pelletized lime, some sawdust if you know it to be clean. I mean, you could use cornmeal. Now, like cracked corn, that's a feed stuff. That bothers me more because it hasn't been processed to the point that there could still be weeds. Like I've seen cuckleburs come in there. You didn't want to add that to the planting either. So something that you just feel is weed free.
Pelletized lime.
Pelletized lime works well.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I hadn't heard of that one. So, and that doesn't affect native plants?
You're not going to put so much on that it's really going to make a big deal. But even so, like the native plants, so what you don't want to use is nitrogen fertilizer.
No. Because
it just promotes top growth of the weeds, and that competes against your little seedlings. But the lime is going to take a while to react with the soil in the first place. And then it's really like native plants can grow over a wide pH range, and that's what you're affecting with the lime.
Okay.
I guess if your soil was really high in calcium or magnesium, depending on what kind of lime you're using, maybe you could overdo it. But that is typically not our problem here in the Ozarks. So jumping to the conclusion.
Excellent. So we've talked about when, November 15th to February 15th.
Yeah.
We talked about how. I like the idea of pelletized lime. I've never tried that, so I'm definitely going to try that this time. So now about what?
What to plant. So I think that diversity of plants is what you're after.
Yes.
And we can do anything from custom mixes. Some people are like, I know my plants and I only want, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay, we can design custom mixes. But a lot of times people are like, no, I want native plants. You're good at designing mixes. I just, not that particular. I just want a nice mix. So we have different choices. So what you're going to want to do is, this is going to be something where you're going to need to find out the square footage of the wetter area versus the mesic area.
Okay.
And so that because and I mean, study it over. Make sure you think that our description of it, and that being the mesic area being, yeah, I could grow corn there if I wanted to. Don't want to, but I could if I wanted to. And the wet area being, you can drive anywhere on the farm. You can drive in that other part of the planting, but don't drive down there. You'll get stuck. So it stays wetter longer.
Okay.
You know, it's the spot where you worry about losing your boots when you walk across it, kind of thing.
Right.
So if you decide either of those are wrong, you've got lots of time to observe here, which is good. But then it's just a matter of picking out a mix that meets your goals. You've got huge, wide array of choices because your goals are wildlife oriented. Doesn't hurt your feelings if it's also pretty and like shorter mix. Doesn't hurt your feelings if it's a taller mix. And that tends to be the difference between the landscaping mixes and the wildlife mixes.
Okay.
The landscaping mixes are like waist high, give or take. The wildlife mixes are waist high, ankle high, and 12-foot tall, all at the same time, different plants with those different heights. So, yeah, so like the wet area particularly, I really think about that wet meadow mix because it has the plants that like it wet. Now, if you say it's not quite as wet as I thought, I would adjust. But that's a good one. And it's designed for with landscaping in mind, but it also, I mean, it's equally good for wildlife. We're just looking for a diversity of plants is what we're looking for.
And it has grasses in it as well, or?
So I'd mix that companion grass mix for wet sites with it. And so then, and you can vary the ratio. If you're like, okay, 50-50. And so factors that make people go one way or another are like, what do they consider to be showy? What look do they want? But then on the other side, you know, like the wildflower component will be a little more expensive. You're not looking at a lot of cost for this area, just the size of it. But anyway, we all have to take our budget into consideration too.
Right.
So, and we can like, you know, you can look at a quote and you can say, oh, let's adjust that, you know, that's a little over the budget. Let's adjust that. Or no, I want more wildflowers as it turns out. So, but you can go like a 50-50 mix. You can go up to 75% wildflowers. I do like to put about 25% grasses in there because it does a couple things. It helps suppress the weeds. They grow different than the wildflowers. And so you're going to have weeds the first years of a native planting. But when you have the planting established, if you have those grasses in there, it helps to shade the soil and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So it helps discourage the weeds. If you want to do a controlled burn, it will help you to be able to do the controlled burn, give you fuel for the fire. They give you some winter color that the grass or that the wildflowers really don't. And I mean, we're not talking like bright showy reds and oranges and pinks and whatever, but like kind of rusty reds and some orange colors and whatnot. And then they provide a wildlife habitat function. So at least 25% grasses, 50-50 is a nice mix. You could even go like 25% wildflowers and 75% grasses. I would put a good amount of the forbs or wildflowers in there just from the wildlife standpoint. But 50-50 might be magic, and you might vary it one side or the other of that, and it would still be wonderful.
So perfect.
So that, and then when you get into the more mesic site, where you've got that shade, I kind of like the thoughts of the shadows and sunbeams mix. And again, like you've got a whole 9 months or whatever to evaluate the shadiness of each area and the soils of each area. And you're trying to kill more trees anyway. So, you know, if you come back and you're like, actually, that area is not that soil and we opened it up way more than we thought we would, or, you know, whatever those factors are, you can take and modify this. But that shadows and sunbeams mix, I don't like to use it on real wet soils, which is why I went away from it on the other. You could also, so shadows and sunbeams mixed with companion grass mix. Again, the shadows and sunbeams is a wildflower mix, companion grass mix is your grass component. So you could do that. You could also do something like the butterfly and hummingbird mix. It's going to have some of those taller ones in there. You could do the wildlife chuckwagon mix, any of those. But where you've got that shade, I kind of keep leaning back towards the shadows and sunbeams, or at least a good component of that. You can also mix and match these mixes as long as they're adapted and end up with more species, right?
Yeah.
So, or you can zone it. You're like, okay, these are both mesic sites, but that one's got full sun almost, and this one's more part shade. So maybe you put, the mix that the butterfly and hummingbird or the wildlife chuckwagon where you've got more full sun. And then in the more part shade area, you do the shadows and sunbeams. And all of those are wildflower mixes that I mix with a companion grass mix. And we've got companion grass mixes for dry, mesic, and wet, and part shade situations.
Oh, that's fantastic. I can just mix and match.
Yeah, you can mix and match.
Yeah.
Just making sure that whatever you're doing is adapted to the site you're doing.
I'll have to check out your chuckwagon mix. I hadn't looked at that one yet.
Yeah, it is one of the lesser expensive mixes of the wildflowers, and so it's just a diversity of the forbs. We're not going for necessarily aesthetically pleasing forbs, and they might have some of the native sunflowers that get 12 foot tall. But yeah, those are fun mixes. And if you're like, hey, I really love cardinal flower or something, it just the birds make me think of like hummingbirds. So if you've got a particular fascination for hummingbirds, and you want to find the area on your place that's most like the area where this plant likes to grow, right? So cardinal flower likes it really wet. Mm-hmm. And so you'll see it growing like on a rock in the middle of the creek, right? And so if you have a particularly wet part of it and you're like, hey, I really want some cardinal flower, you can also get a packet, get an ounce, something like that, and scatter that in that particular area.
Okay.
So lots of customization you can do.
Right.
Some of it's just a matter of how much, if you're like me with a garden seed catalog and you're like, this is fun, more is better.
Yes.
You can go crazy.
Yeah.
Or you can keep it simple and, just do shadows and sunbeams and companion grass mix for the part shade sites.
Okay.
So any of that is fair game. And if you get to where you're wanting to like customize it more, we can help. If you're like, okay, I want, let's just make up some numbers, 40% shadows and sunbeams, I want 40% companion grass shade, and then the remaining 20%, I want 5%, butterfly milkweed, and I want 5%, these extra species. Right. We can do the math to say, okay, well, this many pounds would give you, in theory, that a percent of stand, if that makes sense.
Perfect.
So, yeah, so what haven't we answered after all of this?
I think you've covered everything. Planting for future management, I think we've kind of talked about that because I've read on your website how to manage the plantings the first year you mow after 12 inches high, I forget.
Yeah, you want to mow high. So if you get a lot of annual weed competition, which sometimes these forested sites come back and hair over with annual weed competition, and sometimes they really don't. I don't know what to expect on your site.
Right.
But if you get the annual weed competition there that first year, mow high. And then and we're talking like we want it haired over 70% canopy coverage of the weeds.
Okay.
Some weeds work better to mow than others. If it's shaped like an umbrella, so you've got your stick and the umbrella up here, if you can come in and whack that umbrella off, that's really effective. If it's like an upside down umbrella, like a crabgrass, so this is like a ragweed.
Right.
This is like a crabgrass. Well, we come in and we whack it off high, and all we do is cut off the very tip top of the seed head. We have done nothing to discourage that plant. So, but that is the weed control method you've got for year one. You're going to have a lot of, depending on if it actually comes on your site, but most sites have a lot of annual weed competition those years. A lot of times your native perennials, you're waiting until year 3 to see the blooms of them.
Right.
And they just have to build that root system under them. And so it's a good way to practice your patience. But that's...
Okay.
Yeah, so then future management, usually it's hard to get rid of all of the weed named X or whatever you're fighting. So you've got spot treatments for those. You can dig them out, of course, by hand if that's practical. Like certain weeds do that well.
Right.
Like a curly dock. You can easily pull that by hand on a really wet day. It's easier than toting a backpack sprayer around or something. But then, fire on brushy weeds will be an important component of habitat management. Doesn't kill them, but it makes them start over at the surface. It top kills them. And so they have to start growing all of their greenery. Again, they don't get to use last year's woody part. Kind of the same as mowing them. And mowing can be a tool for that in the future too. But yeah, lots of work before you get there.
Yeah, I do have a lot of work. But you've given me some great ideas and I really appreciate it.
And most of it is not like, it looks intimidating when you're sitting here today and you're like, okay, I need to, but once you get the plan laid out and, you know, go home, put on a piece of paper, okay, in June I want to do this, and then it's just execute the little steps of the plan, right?
Right.
The really intimidating part is getting the plan in the first place.
It is.
And we've talked about enough details that you can go home and lay that out now.
Yeah, and that's I think why I wanted to do this with you, because the plan itself has been intimidating.
Yeah. Yeah, it helps to, if somebody's got experience, go learn from it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys doing this.
Well, glad you were our first to come out and do this with us. So it's been fun, and we're getting to learn as we go through it. But
a lot of fun.
Anyway, yeah. So I've been Elizabeth. I am Elizabeth with Hamilton Native Outpost, and I've been here with Kathy today. We've had a lot of fun. And we really hope that this can give you, the listener and watcher, a good chance to learn from the experience, the situation that Kathy has, the experience that we have. We're happy if you've got a different situation, you're like, this is not quite my situation. Give us a holler. We're happy to chat about it, hook you up with somebody on our technical team.